Hello, civilized people. Unless you have managed to avoid television, the internet, radio, particularly noisy neighbors, and random text messages asking for money, and depending on where you live, possibly your vote, you are likely aware that things were happening yesterday in a state best known for having tax free liquor stores on the border. Following the sudden departure of Florida man from the race, presumably to continue his war with the Magic Kingdom, some Indian woman finally got what she wanted most in the GOP primary: a one on one showdown with Orange Man in a race that was highly favorable to her. And it turned out poorly. Meanwhile, we also got a look at the first primary on the DNC side of things, where Mr. Nobody and Spiritualist Lady were soundly beaten by Captain Dementia. Today, on the Goss and Rome podcast, we're going to be looking at both of these races to varying degrees to see what exactly we can expect in the coming months and what we can learn from these races. So, Colton, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Robert. How about yourself?
I am just peachy. And you know what? We have to start with the most important thing that is on everybody's mind.
hmm
So, before we get to the particulars of, Orange Man, Captain Dementia, there is another candidate that is far more important. And honestly, only one anybody should really care about.
hmm
And I speak, of course, of the friendly fascist, the tyrant you can trust, the one and only Vermin Supreme. So, for those of you listeners who aren't familiar with Vermin Supreme, he is a libertarian who runs as a joke candidate on the Democratic primary ticket. And he stands out because he's usually got a boot on his head and wears wizard robes. And he runs on a free pony platform. Yeah, he actually wrote a book called I Pony, I believe, talking about his political beliefs and how America should be run, with zombie powered energy. But anyway, he's become something of a staple in New Hampshire, and he's definitely a gem of American politics. So, for those of you interested in his performance, last time I checked, he was sitting at 349 votes, which has seen him outperform across both primaries Mike Pence, Doug Burgum, Tim Scott, Asa Hutchinson, and arguably most interestingly, Ryan Binkley, the only Trump competitor other than Haley who is not dropped out of the race yet. And all the listeners out there, please do yourself a favor and look this guy up. He is hysterical. And he gets up, he shows up to public meetings like this, and he says everything with a perfectly straight face, just daring people to take him seriously. It's wonderful. Moving onward. So, the we'll start with the GOP race because it's the one that's going to garner the most attention and easily the most contested. So, as things stand right now, from the numbers I've got in front of me, a little over 90% of the votes have been counted, excuse me. And as it stands, Trump is up by about 11 and a half points over Haley. Something tells me that's not what Haley was expecting whenever she got her one-on-one race, and arguably this the most beneficial state for her in the country. What do you think, Colt?
Yeah, I think she wanted to keep the margins a bit tighter. But regardless of what mainstream media pundits are saying, in any other election, this is a landslide vote.
Yeah. And I mean, it could have been worse. It could have been much, much worse. And just looking at on the map where there are still numbers yet to come in, it looks like the margins for Trump will continue to grow, um, possibly up to 12 or 13%. That would be my guess. Uh, Trump has always had a knack for overperforming in New Hampshire, which is what leads me to think that. So, I suppose credit should be going to Haley, who won the town of Dixville Notch and got 100% of the votes there. Every single one of all six residents of Dixville Notch voted for Nikki Haley. You don't usually see that kind of sweep too often.
What an astounding victory.
Truly. Unfortunately, the rest of the state isn't going quite so favorably for her. Um, Looking on this list for Manchester. Yeah, Manchester is somewhere where if Haley was really going to have a bang out performance, she would have needed to keep that, you know, within possibly 5 to 7 points. And as things stand there right now, Trump is beating her by 16 points. So that's sort of a solid drubbing. Yeah, it seems like Trump more or less won most of the population centers,
Yeah, it's
which is
oh, go ahead.
kind of interesting because those were the areas Haley where Haley seems like she would be strongest, especially in this race where you've got basically independents can vote. We'll get to it later, but a lot of people, if you're independent and you can vote in either primary, um, are you going to vote in the Democratic primary where you've got an incumbent? Or are you going to vote in the Republican primary where there's a bit more of a contest? So, it seems like you would have a lot more people that like the old guard Republican Party who, in a general election will probably vote Democrat, but who can vote in the Republican primary in New Hampshire. But it doesn't seem like that went all that well there for her.
Yeah, she definitely, the I think it was around 8% from the ABC exit polling where
Mhm.
those people self-identified as Democrats,
Yeah,
and like near 100% of them went for Haley. So I think without those people, it would be even more of a bashing, right?
quite possibly, yes. So based on what we've got in front of us, well, actually, going back to before this, uh, what do you think Trump needed to do coming into New Hampshire?
Well, I think he needed to beat Haley by at least double digits. I think that's what he, like told his supporters and everything that he was going to do, and he accomplished that. I think it was pretty critical that he won in some of the population centers, and he got most of them, or at least he was competitive in most of them. So that's another win for him. Um, what else can you think of, Robert? Robert, you there?
Sorry about that. Had some mic issues. I don't know if Trump necessarily needed to get a double digit win so much as he just needed a win, just because this was a state that was so favorable to Haley that any kind of win there sort of sent the right message to his competitors. But he certainly seemed to achieve that, and a double digit win is sort of just icing on the cake.
I see. Yeah.
And but what do you think was the best case scenario for Trump? I'm assuming the double digit win.
Yeah, double digit win. I think maybe like some polls that were, crazier were suggesting almost 20 points, but I don't think he was taking those into account. I think maybe a higher 10, like double digit, like within the teens would have been his best case scenario.
Yeah. My personal take is that his best case scenario would have been 20 points. Because if he had done that, the primary would have been over entirely. And honestly, even with what's probably going to amount to a 11, 12 point lead, is probably going to be enough to essentially drive Haley from the race, given what's coming later.
Yeah,
So, coming into New Hampshire, what do you think Haley needed to do?
she needed to beat Trump. She needed to hope that her coalition of, the Never Trumpers and some Democrats and moderates would be enough to beat Trump, and that did not happen. This was her most favorable state. If it was going to happen anywhere, it was going to happen here.
Yeah. I've seen, was it Sununu, the governor of New Hampshire, was saying, oh, a close second. A close second was not good enough.
No,
This is of every state in the nation and the way they conduct their primaries. This was Haley's best chance to put a W in her column, and she didn't. Um, I Second place was not good enough. That's the kind of thing you tell to donors to keep your money coming. But she needed to get a win. She didn't. And there are some real questions about the continued viability of her campaign because of that. Because if she can't win somewhere favorable, how does she win going into somewhere, you know, on Super Tuesday that is not at all friendly to her
well,
at all?
she doesn't. That's the point. I think either she's sticking in to this point because they're just giving her money to throw away, or the off chance that something happens to Trump and they get to the convention and she's the only other one with delegates because she's the only one that stayed in.
Well, I get the feeling that if something happened to Trump, you would see Vivek or DeSantis jump back in.
Yeah, but you know what I'm
I
saying though,
think you
like
would see
just
that.
with the
Yeah.
delegates.
Yeah, I agree. I still don't think she would win if something were to happen to Trump because it's still early enough to where one of those others would jump back in, no doubt, and probably wind up with more delegates than she gets.
Well, if she can keep dragging this out, and as embarrassing for her as it probably is.
Yeah. So, out of curiosity,
Hmm.
what did you think was the best case scenario for Haley going into New Hampshire?
Well, I guess I'm gonna show myself a little bit here. I didn't think she was gonna win, but I was maybe the best case scenario that I thought that she was gonna get would be like a 48. Almost a split.
I I think the best case scenario for Haley coming in would have been why I'm not sure at this point if it was even possible because without, well, DeSantis ate some of Trump's support. Vivek ate some of Trump's support. While those two were eating from the same trough as Trump, Haley had a chance to match his share.
Hmm.
But with those two gone, it wasn't going to happen. I think under the conditions, the best case scenario she could have ever hoped for was to even win by a handful of votes. I think that's it. The moment that DeSantis and Vivek left the race, I believe it was over, though. I believe that ended it.
Yeah. I agree with you there.
So so what she needed to do was her best case scenario in my eyes. I don't think she needed to win. She had no real chance of a big win. So best and necessity were sort of the same thing in this case.
Hmm.
So there have been there are a few stats we have regarding the people that turned out to vote in the GOP primary, which in New Hampshire, for those of you unfamiliar, you can vote in either primary you choose. If you are an independent, you can vote Republican primary or Democratic primary, but you can only vote in one of them. And it's a state where people very freely change their party affiliation to vote in whichever primary they want. So going into this, the party IDs of the people who voted in the GOP primary, not by how they're registered, but how they identify, 51% of them were Republicans, 43% were independents or nonpartisans, and 6% were Democrats, which sort of shows how influential, you know, that non-Republican vote can be in the Republican primary. And that is a pretty good turnout for independents. Based on the numbers I've seen, that is higher than what it is normally. Although it's worth noting that there were quite a few efforts made on behalf of Haley to sort of drive up that number. But even still, the Republicans were 51% versus 49% other. So, Colton,
Hmm.
among this, Haley and Trump were sort of polar opposites. Among people who self identified as Republican, Trump won 74%, whereas Haley only won 25. I think that's a pretty clear indication that Trump has pretty soundly rebuilt the Republican Party in his image.
Yeah. Do you think that those last people are holdouts from like the earlier days, or do you think they're just never Trumpers for some reason?
Um, Now, I've never seen numbers that indicate that the Never Trump movement anywhere amounts to a 25%.
Yeah.
I don't have the numbers for the state in front of me. Usually, the numbers that I've seen for the Never Trump movement range anywhere from, 5 to 13. I think 13 is the high mark for what I've seen of it. But I can't remember who I was watching in regards to this. But they sort of highlighted the difference between your blue collar Republicans and your country club Republicans. And we'll get back to that in a bit. We have the income averages for who voted for who.
Hmm.
And I think that, well, Haley generally appealed to a lot of the country club Republicans, whereas Trump had more appeal to your blue collar Republicans, which is, that's always been sort of his thing. He's been very good at, winning over the blue collar workers to the GOP. That was kind of how he succeeded, and part of the reason why you now see, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, those becoming swing states and in play.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, on the side of independents, um, Haley got 60% of them, whereas Trump got 38%. So that's a spread of 22%. Now, the one thing we don't really have in this is independents account for a very large portion of New Hampshire's voter population. And we don't know exactly how many of these are people who, you know, okay, they're voting in the Republican primary, but they already know they're going to vote for Biden in the general. You have a lot of people that'll do that in these kinds of primaries. And I would like to know what those numbers are, but unfortunately, I don't have that. But that being said, big takeaway I see in this is that Haley is not winning with Republicans.
No, not at
And
all.
while, and I'm not sure in a state like New Hampshire that somebody who, I'm not sure if we can really take too much from the independence thing here, just because, I mean, we've encountered this loads, I know, over the years, Colton.
Hmm.
Somebody will claim they're an independent, and you're like, oh, who did you vote in the last election? Republican. And the election before that, Republican. What about the three elections before that? Republican. Well, they identify as an independent, but they are a reliable Republican voter. And you see the same thing with Democrats as well. It's people that, in a lot of ways, they don't want to tie themselves to a party, but at the same point, they reliably vote for it.
Yeah.
And we don't really have a breakdown of that as well. So, yeah, I wish there was more data I could get from that. And you said that you had seen numbers related to the 6% Democrats or 8% Democrats in
Um,
the numbers you were looking at.
yeah, it was in the stuff I linked to you. It was essentially that among those Democrats that switched over, they obviously majority of them voted um for Haley, right?
Like what size majority are we talking? Just
Like
ballpark. I know you
95,
don't have.
90.
Yeah. That doesn't really shock me. Um, that doesn't really shock me, as I think that they're among a lot of, I'd say among both a wing of Republicans and Democrats. You have Democrats that don't like the progressive movement and Republicans that don't like the America First or MAGA movement, what have you, that sort of long for the old days of, a Bill Clinton or a George Bush. So I get the nostalgia there. And yeah, I think that will slowly fade with time, though, because at this point, I don't think the Republican Party has any intent to go back. At least the voters sure don't seem to be interested in that.
Well, among those though, you kind of linking it to nostalgia, that's backed up by numbers regarding age statistics on who voted for what. The majority of people that voted for Haley were in older than 45 or 50. I can't remember the exact bracket they used, but it was older,
Yeah.
far older.
So yeah, I'll go ahead and do age next. I've got those in front of me. Trump won the 18 to 29 vote, 60 to 36% over Haley. Yeah, Trump got 60%, Haley got 36. So he pretty soundly beat her among young people.
Hmm.
Then the 30 to 44 bracket, Trump won 56 and Haley won 43. Take that up to 45 to 64. And Trump won those with 55% to Haley's 44%. And the oldest bracket of 65 plus, Trump won with 51% to Haley's 47%. So it seemed like older people generally favored Haley more than Trump. Well, they still favored Trump more so, but they were more inclined toward Haley, I guess, because he won every age bracket,
Yeah, it was more of a split vote in the older crowd.
which is a stark difference from Iowa because Haley won the young vote in Iowa
Hmm.
pretty resoundingly. But let's see.
Perhaps because it was easier to vote in New Hampshire. It's not a caucus.
Yeah, the caucuses are weird. Um, they're good for gauging enthusiasm, but they don't tend to hold people's interest enough to where they go and just sit there for hours to, discuss candidates and then write their candidate's name on a piece of paper and throw it into a hat.
Hmm.
Which, yes, that's how caucuses work. Now, going into just some other details on this, you would expect women to sort of skew toward Haley a bit, but just have a breakdown of married and unmarried men and women here. But married men favored Trump 52% to Haley's 45%. Married women was the only area where they generally favored Haley, and it was 48% Trump, 51% Haley. Unmarried men um, favored Trump 66 to 33, and unmarried women very much favored Trump over Haley, 56% to 41. So it doesn't seem like you know women were really coming out in droves to support Haley over Trump.
Yeah, I honestly was surprised by the unmarried women skewing more towards Trump. I
Yeah,
Yeah, I was very surprised by that. I thought they would more towards go towards Haley, who's spoken more positively about abortion issues and stuff like that.
yeah. The only other bracket where you could tell that well, where Haley sort of became notable, and I don't have this one in front of me at the moment, was that Haley scored higher, performed better among with women who had young children, married or unmarried,
Hmm.
which that one that one actually shocked me a bit. I sort of figured like a lot of things with the Trump campaign, a lot of what has been part of his appeal is the nostalgia to the pre-COVID times before you started to see, a lot of price hikes
Hmm.
and then the inflation going into the Biden years. And, you know, kids can be expensive. And I think I sort of figured that if you had young kids, you might be having to pinch some more pennies. And so there might be a bit more, like, it's sort of dumbing it down a lot, but people like cheap groceries and cheap gas. I sort of figured, the nostalgia for that might help Trump with them, but that didn't seem to come through.
Well,
That was one that actually shocked me. I figured the women with kids would go Trump.
I come at it from a different angle. I was shocked, right? But I kind of viewed, Trump. Obviously, he's a known commodity. He's been in office, right? You can't say that about Haley unless you live in South Carolina. And I was kind of surprised that, obviously, women with young kids, they probably value stability. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
you'd think, like, with what Trump's about. You've lived through 4 years of it, and most of us lived through the end of that. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's surprising that I guess from my point of view, is that Nikki Haley is seen as the more stable candidate.
Yeah. I can see that. I mean, that's kind of how she's trying to run her campaign. Like, essentially, it might as well be her slogan now that you can't beat Democratic chaos with Republican chaos. That's kind of what she keeps pitching.
Hmm.
See. Next up, the one that is probably the most telling in this is household income. And this is the one where it really shows Trump's strength with blue collar workers. Of the people that voted from households that make 66, excuse me, that make 50K a year or less, Trump won 66% of them to Haley's 32. That is pretty impressive. It really shows how it shows his command over the blue collar wing of the party. Colts, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I thought you were gonna keep going. um,
No, 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 no.
I mean, from the numbers though, it can pretty much be stated that everyone that makes less than 100 grand a year voted for Trump for the most part.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it gets a little better for Haley in the 50 to 100K area, um, as 55% of people that earn between 50 to 100K a year went Trump, and Haley got 44% of those. But it was in the 100K plus where Haley actually won, although not by a huge margin. In households that made 100K or more, 51% of those voted for Haley, whereas only 47 voted for Trump, at least according to these polls.
Hmm.
Another one that's actually really quite shocking is employment status. Looking at who people supported if they are full-time employees or unemployed and part-time. Essentially, if you are the full-time employees who voted, Trump beat her 60-40 among those. Whereas if you are unemployed, retired, what have you, otherwise not full-time in your employment, Haley beat Trump 51-48. So that was very close. That's definitely margin of error for an exit poll. But the employment thing, that full-time employment staggering so much, well, favoring Trump so much is pretty impressive. Again, I think that just further highlights how influential he is among blue collar Republicans.
Yeah,
That's a
definitely.
big number. And one other, well, actually, is it another one that is pretty impressive is you all the time you can't turn on the media, well, the news without hearing someone call Trump a racist. So you would assume that you know he would not be terribly popular among non-whites. And on the racial breakdown of things, Trump won 54% of the white vote, whereas Haley got 44%. But Trump also got 59% of the non-white vote, whereas Haley only got 38%.
That's
So
damning.
that apparently, they, it's not my place to say whether somebody's a racist or not. And but apparently, in the eyes of these people, he's not, by about a 20-point swing. So, uh, and last thing to go over in these exit numbers, candidate satisfaction. And this, I believe, is arguably the worst possible news for Haley in all of this. Uh, when asked of all the people that did the exit survey, when asked if they would be satisfied if Haley was the candidate, 52% said yes. Whereas if same question, but whether they would be satisfied with Trump as the candidate, 61% said yes. So roughly a 10-point swing as far as satisfaction for a candidate.
Hmm.
That's a big difference. And I think it's kind of hard to, I mean, obviously it's an exit poll, take them as you will. But if you do take it as gospel, that makes it very hard for Haley to make a case to her donors that well, to small donors, that an alternative to Trump is really necessary.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of
And,
it like that before. In that case, yeah.
but yeah. So moving right along. So tell me, from the get-go of this race, do you believe that Haley ever had a realistic path to the nomination?
No, and this race is the nail on the coffin.
Now, I think she did have a path. I believe there was a period where if things had gone perfectly for her, she could have. And bear with me on this. Like I said before, I don't think she was ever going to win a one-on-one race with Trump, which is why I never understood why she was always talking like she was eager for it. Trump's the body of people that support Trump as a second pick was the majority of Vivek's voters, the majority of DeSantis's voters. What Haley needed was for Christie to get out and for Vivek and DeSantis to stay in. And honestly, you know, I don't. I mean, imagine if DeSantis had stayed in and eaten another 4% of the vote. At this point, most of those would have been what Trump got
Hmm.
yesterday. And Vivek's support, all of those have now gone to Trump. And you could have seen this be very, very close if they were still in it. But she needed both of them in the race.
Well, that's the problem with you know, essentially having three candidates with the same platform is that they're all going to consolidate at some point.
Yeah. And she needed to make an impression before they did. And she didn't. DeSantis seemingly ran out of money, and Vivek saw the writing on the wall.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I do think she did have a realistic path, but I don't ever think that path depended upon anything Haley did. I believed it depended upon DeSantis and Vivek staying in the race long enough. And even then, I don't think it was a good path for her. I don't think it was a solid path because, okay, sure, she winds up with the classic nostalgia Bush era Republicans. But those other three candidates have to sort of cannibalize each other. And eventually, some of them are going to drop out. So Haley's success would have largely been,
Time gated,
she would have been, hmm,
time gated, maybe.
kind of, yes. The moment that they consolidated, I don't think she had a chance. What needed to happen was for them to be with her with a narrow victory in states, whereas they just split everything and nothing was very decisive enough for any of them to drop out. That was her path. But DeSantis's campaign was run very poorly, and he spent so much money in Iowa. And I think that you know, I'm not saying it was a good path. I'm not saying that it wasn't an incredibly foolish path to have bet on, but there was a possibility.
I mean, that sounds like something that you'd like plan for and hope for before any votes are cast. And then once you see that, voting has started and that, Trump is still the de facto leader of the America First movement by a large margin,
Yeah.
that that seems like it her plan there wouldn't have survived that.
Well, I agree. Um, so next up, right now, as things stand, does Haley have any path to the GOP nomination at all?
Only if, something happens to Trump and she's the next one up with delegates and it doesn't just go to the unbound delegates just voting in someone else. If they like for some reason decide to honor system it and be like, well, she came in second. Other than that, no, it's impossible. I will literally say it's impossible. Hot take.
Yeah, I don't think she's got a snowball's chance in hell. She's going into her home state next, which we'll address as well. She's down by 30 points. South Carolina is an open primary, but there's not enough independence there to really influence that to the same degree as New Hampshire does. I think she is, well, going back to what we saw earlier, Trump wins consistently 70 plus percent of Republicans, who are the overwhelming majority of people who vote in Republican primaries. Go figure. Um, yeah, I think that whenever she gets to South Carolina, sh if she stays in, she's going to be crushed. And I think that would spell the end of her campaign unless just raw, dogged determination keeps her going. Or more importantly, the foolhardy donations of, you know, big donors.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, did you see Haley's speech last night?
No, I didn't. I didn't bother. It was something. Yeah, no. Let's just say no.
Yeah. So in it, she's talking about how she's going to continue on to South Carolina. Yeah, DeSantis did much the same thing in Iowa, where he's like, "Yeah, we'll continue." He talked about how he got his ticket punched in Iowa. Well, clearly not. Do you think that Haley is going to drop out before South Carolina?
Um, I don't know. I mean, at this point, I'm just gonna be realistic and say that she's a puppet of her donors, and if her donors want her to keep being in, then she'll be in. But I, I don't think it's up to her or to her embarrassment. I think maybe she should at this point. The
Mhm.
Biden administration, his campaign has already declared that internally that Trump is the nominee, and then they're going to start preparing to run against Trump. And what's Rhonda? Is it Ronna McDaniel, the
Yep.
Republican? Yeah,
Yep.
she's already called for unity, and if she's in anymore at this point, like the base is collapsing around her, so it's up to her donors at this point.
Yeah. I know that you've had a few donors come out and say they're, not going to throw money down a hole.
Hmm.
So I don't. I think she might have the funds on hand to try and compete in South Carolina. I can't imagine why she would. I honestly cannot. Uh, if she goes into her home state and loses with the margins that it looks like she would lose, you're talking about a kind of defeat that you don't recover from. Your political career is essentially over. You're not looking at any kind of favorable position from a Trump cabinet because you are sort of ignoring the writing on the wall to the point where it almost looks like you're running just to cause him harm. Which, I mean, what if you're the president and somebody was running a campaign that they knew they couldn't win expressly just to cause you harm? Would you give them any kind of appointment?
No.
Exactly. Um, I would like to think that she is talented enough to know that she should drop out. Whenever she came out and did her concession speech, I believe she was only down by 4 points. And as of now, that's about tripled.
Hmm.
So she might be waiting until tomorrow to see, what those numbers are and what kind of case can be made to donors. But at this point, I think that, well, I think for the next primary, and I use that word very specifically, that Haley will likely have dropped out. I do believe she will drop just because I can, the kind of people that, give the kind of money necessary to keep a presidential campaign alive usually aren't idiots. I'm not going to say all of them aren't idiots, but most of them aren't. They, you know, have to make, a calculated risk. And if she can't win in New Hampshire, a state that is custom made for her, where does she win? And the answer is she doesn't.
Yep.
Speaking of which, though, all you listeners, the Goths and Rome podcast is going ahead and calling the next race. Donald Trump is indeed projected to win the Nevada caucus. Why? Because every other candidate in the Republican primary saw the polling there and knew better than to even bother to get onto the ballot. So Trump is the only candidate that isn't a relatively, nobody that just got on the ballot. They decided not to even waste their time. So between now and South Carolina, you do have the Nevada race, and
Nevada.
congratulations to, yeah. Oh God, I live there and I still don't pronounce it right.
Trump remains the only candidate to pronounce it correctly.
Maybe that's why. I mean, the polls there showed him at something like 70%. Like it was staggering the last time I saw Nevada polls. Like it was just, yeah. Why would you even bother to run? You were like, you could invest, manpower elsewhere.
Yeah, and the fact that Nevada's in the midst of a political change because of a vote coming in one of the prior elections that mandates that Nevada switch from a caucus to a primary, and this is one of the turnover years where they're like, let's just have both, but the primary doesn't count, and like half the candidates registered for the primary, and only Trump registered for the caucus, and the caucus is the only one that will assign delegates.
So, again, congratulations to Orange Man. You have won the Silver State. Well done. By virtue of actually signing up and getting registered for the only race in the state that, you know, assigns delegates. Looking on to South Carolina, if you were advising the Trump campaign as they're transitioning from New Hampshire to go down to South Carolina, what kind of advice would you give them?
The Trump campaign?
Yeah.
They don't need my help. They're already winning by 30.
Oh, good God. Uh, yeah, I mean, Trump sells himself in South Carolina. Like, there's nothing you really need to do. I mean, at this point, he's got the governor, both senators. He's basically got every elected official in South Carolina endorsing him over Nikki Haley. Like, he had Tim Scott speak at his victory speech in New Hampshire. Like, like he's adding insult to injury just because he can.
It's
And,
yeah.
it's actually kind of funny
I would
how
say that if Nevada didn't have the screwed up system and half the candidates didn't register for the wrong race, that I'd say South Carolina would be his strongest.
yeah, uh South Carolina, he's going into it very strong. Um yeah, like, I don't think there's any advice that he needs.
No, they're doing
The
it.
I do think that he once Haley confirms to drop, he'll have to start pivoting toward the general election. At this point, I think that he's more like, you have never had a Republican nominee or Republican candidate win both New Hampshire and Iowa and not go on to win the Republican nomination. It has never happened. So at this point, bellwethers sort of point to Trump.
So Robert,
Also, you have yeah,
with you saying that they're probably going to be looking towards the general, right?
yeah.
Do you think that this is going to be one of the longest election seasons that we've had in America?
That's a hard one. I think it will be a. I don't think it'll be an election season in a traditional sense, but because I don't think that traditional campaigning will work.
Hmm.
We'll come back to it a bit whenever we discuss the Democratic primary later and what we're looking onto down the line. But there are some things that we've seen from the Democratic results tonight that really beg some questions about how this election would, transpire, that are just sort of different. And yeah, so I'm not sure. Do I think it will be a long season? Yes, because I do think, you're sort of going to winnow everything down to Biden and Trump pretty rapidly.
Hmm.
But I don't think it's going to be done in the same way as you typically did in the past. Now, moving on, assuming Haley goes to South Carolina,
Hmm.
what would you advise the Haley campaign to do to transition into South Carolina, a state that is vastly different from New Hampshire?
Um, yeah, I what can she do? Not much at this point. What can they do to cope with it? Maybe wear blindfolds. Um, cover their ears, I suppose. Just don't show up. That might work.
Uh, yeah. I mean, Honestly, I think she would have to do similar to what was being done in New Hampshire, where South Carolina is an open primary, and she would really have to work. She would probably have to target Democrats and try to get them to come to the polls for her. Basically, a campaign of Biden is already going to win the Democratic nomination. Come and vote for me so you can put an end to Trumpism. Like, that's the only path that I really see. That would be the only thing I could advise them.
I mean, that won't give him a victory though. That maybe give her like 10 points.
I think it would increase the number of people turning out for the primary because essentially she would probably get, you know, 20, 25%. Let's be generous and say that, you know, she's going to have 40. If she can get a large number of Democrats to come out, I mean, might be able to stay competitive. I think she would be entirely dependent upon turning out Democrats to vote for her. And whenever I say Democrats, I'm referring to independents who are generally lean voting Democrat, as well as, any Democrats who might be less than pleased with Biden.
Do you think that so the primary is on February 24th. Do you think that's
Yes.
enough time for people to change their registration to be able to vote in that, you think?
Uh, South Carolina doesn't have party registration. They can just choose one,
Mm.
like Texas, I believe. So yeah, I don't really. I think that would be her only chance. So, last bit of advice regarding Haley. If you were advising Haley's donors, what advice would you give them?
Do you want a serious answer or another joke one? Because I mean, there's no way for her
Go,
to win.
go, go with the joke first, and then we'll get into the serious.
Maybe they should talk to a therapist, figure out, like, is it ideological or do they just really hate Trump that much? Because at this point, even the party leader that does not like Trump or Trump candidates is calling for unity.
Yeah.
So, and if it's just ideological and you're like a Democrat donor and you're just doing it to mess with Trump, then like, what, keep going. Why not, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you got to get your jolly somehow.
Yeah, that was kind of like half joking, half serious. Because, like,
And honestly, my advice for them would be to drop Haley and focus on races they might be able to actually win.
no, like local races or house races.
Maybe not local, but definitely House and Senate. Uh, Honestly, candidates lie. Go figure.
Mm-hmm.
And it would not be a shock. Like, for example, eye patch fella from Texas, former SEAL. What's his name?
Crenshaw?
Crenshaw, yeah. Like, for example, Crenshaw ran very much in tandem with the America First movement. Uh, he's his voting habits generally don't align with that all that much. He's much more, like a McCain Republican.
Yeah, like a neocon.
Yeah. So that's generally what you're going to look at there. You would be looking for people who can run under that banner and then vote differently. That would probably be their best bet for choosing candidates
Yeah,
and
and
who they should actually donate to.
until the America First movement is done, they should probably just focus on that. That Because at this point, there's two successors for the America First movement, so they have no chance to, influence as long as this brand of populism is acceptable to the voting people, right? They
Yeah,
have no chance of influencing the presidential primaries.
I agree. Speaking of the successors to the American First Movement, um, I'm not sure if you saw this in Trump's speech, but Vivek seems to be becoming a big part of the Trump campaign.
I know, right? It's
My
great.
my question: do you think that he is auditioning for becoming VP, or is he just serving as an attack dog until the field clears?
I think that Trump is using him as a person to like say the meaner things and to be sort of a hype, kind of generation guy. I'm not
Yeah,
sure whether he's, going to get an appointment as of yet. I don't know if Trump is going to consider him for an appointment, but just going by the numbers, right? Until, like Joe Biden obviously is a vice president that became a president, right?
yeah,
But that total of vice presidents that became presidents, that's only 8%. It's not a huge help for someone's future political career to be a vice president. So I don't know if Vivek himself is wanting to be vice president.
yeah. I agree. That being said, you've had a lot of people. I believe Glenn Beck was the most notable one. You know, these are notable conservative speakers. Trump, as the front runner, is in communication with them, and can't remember. I don't remember the exact show it was on when Glenn said this, but you know, when asked by Trump, "Who do you see as being vice president material?" Said apparently the most common answer Trump received was Vivek.
Yeah. Um, and that was among like people that Trump asked that gave him that answer. Just to clarify.
My understanding, yes.
Okay. I
It seems to be a pretty common thing.
So policy wise though, right? Do you
Yeah.
think that Vivek could do more as a cabinet member, or do you think that the vice president can do more policy wise? I think
Oh,
cabinet is a bit more important for policy.
well, I think being VP would really help the Trump ticket just because of how young Vivek is.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. But um, what's it? If you were to go with the other kind of air, right, and that would be DeSantis, right? Is that who you were referring to
Uh,
in being the other
Clarify the
air?
question.
So who would be the
Yes,
other air? Yeah, DeSantis.
DeSantis. DeSantis.
Yeah, DeSantis is he's not old, so they could kind of do
He's
that,
not.
or at least he's gotten a
He,
facelift or something.
he's not, but he can't be, a VP because they're both from Florida,
Yeah,
which I always found humorous. You have so many sites talking about how, oh, Trump's choices for VP, and then they list DeSantis, and it's like, no, that's illegal. You cannot have a president and a vice president from the same state.
silly rule.
And what I find humorous with it is that every single major news outlet in the US has cited him as a potential VP pick. Fox, CNN, MSNBC, every single damned one of them. Like, the people writing this actually understand that he can't be VP if Trump is the president?
Maybe that's just a sign of the times that they'll just ignore the rule, like many other government rules.
Kind of. Yeah, you're not exactly getting the best coverage.
Yeah, but
But that being said, I do think Vivek. I'm not sure if Vivek would be the best choice,
for
but I do
VP, yeah,
think that. But it certainly seems like he's being auditioned. Like the two people that it sort of look like have been being auditioned. At this point, one looks like Vivek and one was Tucker Carlson,
I don't think
which would
Tucker
be a
would do it.
very interesting choice. I don't think he would. I think, you know, he's got, a big family, more money than God. He can, sit in his basement and record interviews and broadcast them on Twitter for more viewers than he ever got on Fox. And he can, just, take a bath in cash. And like, I don't understand why he would ever want to do that.
Hmm.
I don't get that. Um, Although I do think that Ramaswamy would be interesting just because he brings forward a lot of issues that are relevant to younger people.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
we discussed we touched on in the AI episode was that Ramaswamy, is one of the few people talking about that. Um, there have been a few instances, I can't remember exactly what they were, but they were part of, Vivek's campaign, and then Vivek endorsed Trump and met Trump. And now they're part of the Trump campaign. It's like he's sort of incorporating that. So Vivek certainly seems to be leaving his mark. And honestly, it seems like he's becoming more influential now that he's dropped out of the race, which is not something you usually see.
Yeah, it's definitely strange and unusual, but I'm all for it.
Yeah. So now, transitioning away from the GOP primary, let's talk about the Democratic primary. And first off, I just want to cite some numbers differences. We don't have the exact number of people who voted in which primary yet. But right now, it looks like about 326,000 people voted in the GOP primary, whereas only about 100,000 voted.
Robert, you there? Sorry, Robert, you cut out. Can you repeat yourself?
Okay, not a problem. Uh, as it stands, it looks like about 326,000 people voted in the GOP primary, whereas only about 100,000 voted in the Democratic primary. Now, honestly, whenever you've got an incumbent in office, there's not so much enthusiasm for turning out for primaries. But especially somewhere like New Hampshire, where your independents can, go vote in, the Republican primary, which, will actually have consequences for the general election. But that's not a great number. And looking at things where they stand now, it kind of looks like well, Joe Biden is easily going to win the nomination. I don't think there's any question of that. What you are seeing is something that appears to be a very real lack of enthusiasm for Joe. Uh, Joe did not actually wind up on the ballot. He had to be put in as a write-in candidate. Um, and as things stand right now, assuming that he gets all of the remaining unprocessed write-ins, Joe Biden would get about 66.9% of the vote in an election where he's an incumbent in a state that he won in the general election. And that, that doesn't really speak to his popularity, especially when you consider that, you know, his biggest competitor is some guy named Dean Phillips that nobody's really ever heard of. I know that Musk did some kind of event with him on Twitter not too long ago. But he's sitting at 19.6, and Marianne Williamson is sitting at 4.7. I mean, obviously, they're he's beating the hell out of his competitors, but he's an incumbent. You would expect him to get more than 66.9%, wouldn't you?
Um, yeah, I mean, yes and no, because obviously, a lot of the people that are thinking about things more strategically that would pay attention to an incumbent primary, right? They might go and vote in the Republican primary, like you said. Um, so I think maybe this is just the people that, heard there was voting today and they just showed up and they're just like, hey, Joe's name isn't on the list.
Uh, I will tell you, you could not get into one of those polling places without seeing a whole horde of people outside holding signs that say "Write in Joe."
Yeah, so I mean that probably explains the amount of people that requested write-ins.
Oh yes. Uh, I mean, one of the things that I'm sort of finding humorous in all of this is that when I was watching the numbers tick up for, you know, the unprocessed ballots, well, the unprocessed write-in ballots getting ticked in, it looks like some of the people in the Phillips and Marianne Williamson camps also decided to get write-in ballots and then write in their candidates' names just to mess with it.
Hmm.
So it's been funny, even though they were on the ballot and you could just, check a box. It seems like a lot of people that were voting for them actually decided to get the write-in ballots just to mess with them. Then they, you know, wrote in
Yeah, just
their
go ahead
candidate
and,
as
and
well.
just go ahead and do my vote by hand.
Yeah, we're going to do this the old-fashioned way. And yeah, that it seems like that's something for you know just to mess with them. I admit I find that kind of funny.
Yeah, me too.
But I mean, the big thing this points to is a lack of enthusiasm. Like, if you've ever, I don't know, watched any interviews with Trump supporters, by and large, they are incredibly enthusiastic. Meanwhile, you know, 66.9 does not scream that Democrats are enthusiastic for Joe Biden.
I'm gonna go ahead and respectfully disagree here. Not in the fact that saying that people are enthused about Joe Biden. I think that's not true at all. Um, I think Joe Biden only won because he was a protest vote against Trump. I think those people are still there, and I think the incumbent primary, at least in this election year for the Democrats, is it doesn't matter. There was no one else running besides RFK, right? And he didn't. It didn't end up
Yeah,
happening.
he dropped out and went independent, so he'll be on the ballot in November.
Yeah, that's exactly so. Um, yeah, I'm gonna respectfully disagree, just because this incumbent primary doesn't matter to me, in my opinion, and those same people that voted against Trump rather than for Biden, I think they're still there.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of looking back. I don't recall ever really meeting an enthusiastic Joe Biden supporter. The argument was by and large, orange man bad. He's not Trump.
Hmm.
So yeah, I get that. I'm not sure what effect this will play, but reason why I think it's significant is that looking back at you know when Joe was elected, he came into office in a pretty solid situation approval wise. He had something like 55% approval nationwide. And right now he's got 56.3% disapproval. Like only 39.8% of people actually approve of the job that Joe Biden is doing.
Hmm.
So, whenever you see that kind of disapproval paired with these kinds of rather dismal results, I mean, again, I don't, obviously, if you've got an incumbent running, you're not going to see, like that's why I'm not looking at the numbers of the number of people that showed up to, you know, vote in the Democratic primary and analyzing that because, you expect a drop off in a non competitive year. You would expect some, and you certainly wouldn't expect them to be showing up and voting for literal, who the hell is that person?
Well, he got some, like you said, he got apparently some credit from Elon Musk. So
Yeah, but I'm not sure how much weight that carries with your vote blue no matter who crowd these days.
no, but apparently in a Democratic incumbent primary that carries about a 20%. So
Maybe, but I mean, there's been a lot that the DNC has been struggling with, and there are two things in general that I feel like need to be discussed, and some of this is through the grapevine talk, given our line of work. And the first one of those comes out of Pennsylvania, and I've heard a lot of talk about the Pennsylvania DNC being in somewhat of a state of disarray. And I mean, if you've got a lack of enthusiasm for Biden, a lot of enthusiasm for Trump, especially in these rural areas that tend to, overperform for him and, how he wins elections, how Trump wins elections. Um, and then you pair that with a non functioning way, under functioning Pennsylvania Democratic machine. That doesn't bode well for him in Pennsylvania.
no, no, it doesn't. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Trump win Pennsylvania both times around? Or
No, he won Pennsylvania in 2016 and
hmm
lost it in 2020.
yeah, that's right. It's yeah, it kind of says something that they're struggling that much when, apparently you can only run on Trump bad for so long, and the first president to not be Trump is this disapproved.
Yeah, the other, you know, again, these are things that, we hear through the grapevines just because, the people you talk to. Another is that the Biden campaign has essentially decided to not throw too much at the state of Georgia. Apparently, internally, they don't really see a path for victory for Biden in the state of Georgia, given the current environment. Specifically, the fact that he is largely dependent upon minority voters, where enthusiasm is a big deal because they tend to turn out at lower rates, excuse me. And so, with the is very real lack of approval among minority communities in the Atlanta area, they don't think he will have the ability to actually compete with Trump in Georgia.
But what's their replacement for Georgia then?
I don't know. I mean, I can understand their reasoning. Uh, I mean, right now, in the first video we ever did, looking at like, I think it was the CNN numbers, you had CNN's projection map where a lot of traditional swing states are currently polling with Trump up and outside of the margin of error.
Hmm.
So, you know, If that is the situation, you need to really focus fire on a few states. And I don't see money really being a huge problem, especially as an incumbent. But yeah, I can see them, saying, okay, this state isn't that great. We can afford to lose that state. But then, throwing all of their money at Pennsylvania, which is a far larger prize, to try and keep Trump from holding it at the end of the election.
Hmm.
Yeah, like
That
you're
that's a risky play.
that is a risky play. Considering I think it's right now Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Trump is all up in. He's up in all of those states. And Georgia, I believe, is one where he was up beyond the margin of error.
I mean, you're by throwing away Georgia, you're throwing away 16 votes to try and win 19 votes Pennsylvania. But
That's
hmm,
true. Keep in mind, I believe if Trump picks up both Georgia and Pennsylvania, including what he won in the last election, he would have gotten to 270.
do you think Trump's going to win Arizona this time around?
No, they seem to think that it's quite possible. You've got a very divided GOP field. I can't remember who it is, but apparently the candidate for Senate, Carrie Lake, she's sort of weaponizing her campaign to help push forward the Trump movement. And apparently, and I can't believe I'm saying this, supposedly the Arizona GOP is actually functioning now.
I
The,
just don't believe you.
for all of our listeners, there is nothing more dysfunctional in this country than any given party office. Like, they are some of the most uncoordinated organizations that are prone to all manner of infighting. And honestly, uh, let me be clear: the from everything that I've heard on both sides of this, the GOP party officers are generally far worse in how bad they operate. Just because you have a lot more factionalism in the Republican Party. But I and I just want you to imagine the most dysfunctional organization you can, make it 1,000 times worse, and then toss it in a dumpster fire, and that is the historical Arizona GOP. It's just it's an awful organization. like Lord, it's been, what was it, like a decade ago, where somebody among that organization was caught sleeping with their interns, and then instead of firing him, they just fired everybody that knew about it.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like, it is that dysfunctional. And then they fired the interns. Uh, but like, it was just completely a mess.
And it's so weird there because, you know, there's a bunch of, like you're saying, there's a bunch of factions all the time in Arizona, and there's a bunch of hype around the politics, especially on the GOP. Like Charlie Kirk's organization is there, right? Is headed there, like that's their headquarters.
Yeah, Turning Point is headed there, isn't it?
Yeah, like Turning Point's headquartered there. A huge amount of like the America First stuff, like is championed by the leaders there, like Carrie Lake, like you said, and she's like prominent on a national level, and it's just so weird how it's so dysfunctional given all of the organization within it. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe all the competent people just end up working at the organizations rather than at for the party.
Yeah. So to all of our listeners, by the way, if you ever want a career where you can fail upwards, go work for one of the political parties. Seriously,
Hmm.
like go in, do the worst job imaginable, and you'll be running the show one day.
As long as you stay there. Yeah, political stuff it favors loyalty over merit.
Very much so. There's a reason why Colton and I don't do work for parties.
Yeah, it's a mess. I've had enough of it.
Yeah. Going back to what we were saying about Pennsylvania, like to the credit of them, a couple years ago, whenever they got Fetterman elected, that was genuinely impressive. Uh, and I don't mean speak ill of this. I'm sure he's a nice enough guy. And again, the GOP had an awful candidate in the form of Dr. Oz.
Ugh.
You had a candidate who was recovering from a stroke that very clearly and very openly had, mental deficiencies at the time. I'm not sure if mental deficiencies is the appropriate term, but he had deficiencies in his ability to, function, and he still won. That alone, in my eyes, elevated the Pennsylvania DNC to something of legend.
That was their glory year.
Like, again, I don't want to slight Fetterman, but that's impressive. I mean, there is something to be said. And that would be like, taking, I mean, admittedly, it's a state where they should win, but it would be like, a local mayoral race in a town that's, 80% Republican. And the DNC decides we're going to run this cat named Mittens. And somehow they win it. Because of course you would.
Yeah, right.
Dude, now you've got, Mayor Mittens. And it was just something where it's like so out of left field that, yeah, you don't think it'll work, but somehow they did it. So I'm kind of shocked, and I'm not fully willing to think that there's a lot of truth in that rumor, but it is something that I've heard from several people.
Hmm.
Um, but moving right along, out of curiosity, if you were advising the Biden campaign, at this point, Biden knows who he's going to face in the general. It's just a matter of time. If you were facing, if you were, if you were advising the Biden campaign, what would you advise them to do right now? What would your advice be?
Well, I would try to get Biden to do as many in-person events and rallies as he can, kind of like Trump, where I mean the main allegation that most people have against Biden is, besides ideological ones, is that he's old and there might be concerns about his mental faculties. So if you can get him to perform well at an in-person event, and those are all going to be recorded anyways, right?
Yeah,
Then you can kind of overcome those rumors that he's not all there.
that becomes a question because personally, and I don't mean to slight him, but I'm not sure, given a lot of his performances and what I've seen, that he is, you know,
All there.
all there.
I mean,
And
they can give him drugs, pump him full
yeah,
of stuff.
it's true. But I mean, he basically, ran his 2020 campaign. I think the running joke on the ride is that he ran it from his basement. Like he didn't do much for public opinions. He stayed out and then he let, other people campaign for him.
Hmm.
And he sort of had an out during that time period because of the COVID thing.
Yeah,
But
that's not an option anymore.
I know, but honestly, Biden's performances, whenever he gets up and speaks, don't really inspire confidence in him. He has a habit of mumbling, saying gibberish. He seems to get confused. I honestly think that if he's going to win, he has to stay away from the public eye as much as possible. That would be my first bit of advice.
I mean, I could see us both of what we said being viable.
If he can perform, and he's got the wonderful mental faculties that his staff seem to say he has, then he should certainly go out and speak publicly. If he doesn't, well, what do you do? You basically got to keep him hidden. I don't think he will debate Trump. I do not believe there will be a presidential debate this year.
Seems kind of unprecedented, doesn't it?
It does. I believe that he will use the whole January 6th thing as a way of bowing out of it, saying, I will not debate an insurrectionist. That's my expectation.
Yeah, I could see that happening.
Although I think in reality, the reason might be to, keep him from, having to be so visible.
Do you think if he bowed out of the debates, that would push Trump more, or do you think it wouldn't matter?
I don't know. I think that if he does town halls, he would have screened the questions. That's something you hear about regularly, where he wants questions ahead of time. And I'm pretty confident saying that one is the case now. So I'm not sure. But yeah, if his mental faculties are not all there, which I'm inclined to think now, just given people that I've met and I've worked with who have known Joe over the years, uh, that he's in a bit of decline. If that is the case, I think keep him out of the public eye. If that's not the case, then, you know, throw him out there and counter that argument.
Pump
The
him so full of drugs that he's fully there for about 2 hours.
I mean, you can do that. Next up is whenever, like the other day, I saw where he was sending out Kamala Harris as a surrogate for his campaign. He is sending out someone with a lower approval rating than him to be a surrogate. That seems awful.
Yeah.
That does not seem like a good course of action. I mean, you've got Obama. Make use of Obama. He's well liked. He's broadly respected. Like, that's a good call. But I don't understand why it's been Harris like this. Sure, you've lost Bill Clinton in light of, recent events on an island. You probably don't want him out there. But, well, not necessarily recent events on an island, but recent court documents related to events on an island. And that's not very good. Hillary Clinton is still not popular. Like somewhere like a New Hampshire, that would have been good so that he, one where he need to get a ride in because, you get enough of the diehard Democrats turn out and vote for you in the Democratic primary. Go figure, you're going to win. That seemed to be what they were going for. But if you're going into, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, places where you are not popular, and your VP is even less popular, choose someone who is popular there who will take your side. Just saying, he's got to have somebody who is well liked.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, I'm not sure, like, at this point, if celebrities are actually good advocates anymore, or good surrogates, rather. Just because you keep seeing all of these award shows get, consecutively 25 to 30% lower viewership each year, and it seems like their relevance in the public eye is waning. So I'm not sure who a good surrogate would be. The only ones that really come to mind are the Obamas.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they could try, business leaders or, uh, yeah, God forgive me for saying this one, influencers. Ugh,
Oh God,
ugh.
the world has gone to hell. Clearly,
Yeah, but I think they'd be more effective than some random Hollywood celeb.
kind of. You might be right, but I think it would only really impact the youth,
That's who he
which
needs to show
certainly,
up. Old people already show up to vote. They already know who they're voting for.
oh yeah. I'm just trying to think what else he could do because I mean, he seems to have an enthusiasm problem and he's got a disapproval problem. I mean, if you can, he's, you know, metrically decent economic success, but until you, unless you see a reduction in the cost of gas and in groceries, the day to day stuff, people are not going to feel that. Not really. Between now and the election, most likely.
I think the biggest thing that he could do is probably play up the Trump trials, right? There's the media talking heads are certainly doing that. They're mentioning the number constantly. He's got 91 trials, but
That's
maybe.
true. I'm not sure that actually benefits him either. Um, among independents, the trials for Trump are not terribly popular, and he needs those independents. Like a lot of his talking points just are not landing. Uh, what they have indicted Trump, Trump becomes more popular nationwide. They keep talking about, MAGA extremism. That becomes a meme, is embraced. People joke about it, and Trump goes up in the polls. Like, I don't think those kinds of talking points are going to work.
No, no, I don't think
Like,
so.
I mean, to put this into perspective for listeners, these are the kind of disapproval numbers that Jimmy Carter had whenever Reagan won all states but Minnesota. Just keep that in mind. I don't think we're looking at that by any means, mind you. We are a nation far too divided politically, far too entrenched in the tribalism of things at this point for that to be the case really ever again, or at least I would not think so. But yeah, honestly, it feels like the advice that I would be giving is just like get somebody else to do the talking for you and stay out of the public eye and drop all of the talking points you've been going on about leading up to this campaign because they're just not working. But I don't know. I mean, you can tout the economic success, but until people actually feel it, they aren't going to be enthused. And for, a huge swathe of the country that, has, probably less than $100,000 total household income every year. That additional 25% on the cost of groceries and the doubling of cost of food, you would have to remedy that. And I'm not sure there is anything that he could do that would remedy that before election day.
Like, I, it's hard to see a path to victory based off of anything he could do, right?
Hmm.
It's more just, does Trump do anything egregious during the campaign trail that makes more never Trumpers active from their hibernation?
It's true. I mean, the important thing, probably the biggest takeaway from 2020 was that there were five states that, what is it, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Biden beat Trump in those states collectively by about 50 to 100,000 votes.
Yeah,
Not each, but total. That's how close that was then. And yeah, I wish I could actually formulate a strategy for this. But as weird as it is, it might just be, you know, shut up, go to a corner, and bank on Trump, who is admittedly something of a loudmouth, and wait on the loudmouth to say something that, screws himself. Because it seems like every time the media trashes Trump, he goes up in the polls. Anytime you trash Trump, he goes up in the polls. At this point, I have to wonder if a lot of these people are, supporting Trump just to spite the media and, you know, the traditional political elite. It almost seems like it. I mean, there's worse things you can do with your vote, but still.
yeah. I don't know. It's just so weird when, as much as I hate to say it, the only people with a platform in the DNC are the progressives,
It's
and
true. It's true.
every
And
everyone else is just anti-Trump. it like both the moderates on both sides are just anti-Trump.
yeah, the like it's actually humorous. Probably their biggest cohesive platform, which was economic nationalism, was exactly the same for Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Admittedly, their economic platforms otherwise were vastly different. But not having all of free trade deals and whatnot with the world, that was distinctly part of the Bernie Sanders movement and the Trump movement, and they were the only ones talking about it. And now it appears to be something that Biden hasn't really gone back on it,
Hmm.
but it's kind of funny. Uh, for example, I think Haley would return to that, the older like free trade agreements, just given who her donors are. I have to assume that there is motivation there.
It's such a deeply unpopular thing. Like, as much as the differences between Biden and Trump are huge. The actual governance is like there's been all of the tariffs that Trump put in place are still in place. So it's kind of just
That's
like
true.
it's just like what's happening? What what's the difference in the governance here?
I mean, the probably one most notable difference appears to be foreign policy.
Yeah.
It's probably the biggest one, and it was actually kind of funny. The movement in general sort of started out as a rebuke of Bushism and the foreign wars. I mean, what was it? I think it was in South Carolina in 2016 where Trump was talking like, "Yeah, do you really want more of that?" And basically, in a state that largely helped propel Bush to the presidency, he went in and trashed Bush, and people loved him for it. So that interventionism thing, I believe, is probably one of the biggest differences in governance because, I mean, with Biden, you've certainly probably seen more involvement in Ukraine than you would see with a Trump. Almost definitely.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know how Trump would deal with the Israel Palestine thing. I really don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
I Yeah, that's a mess. Y- Yeah, going back to the topic, do you have anything else that would be advantageous for the Biden campaign?
Their only advantage is that they're not Trump and that they are the incumbent. That's it.
They do have the bully pulpit, yeah, and they aren't Trump.
What a platform.
God, what the hell has gone wrong in American politics? But switching that at this point because we've asked about the Biden side of things. It's starting to look like when the Biden campaign is acknowledged at this point that Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. So, if you were advising the Trump campaign as it transitions for the general election,
Hmm.
what would you advise them?
Well, keep going on immigration. Keep going on about inflation. Um, Specifically, keep going on about energy prices because that seems to be something that is ticking with people. Um,
Yeah. Believe it or not, one of the most successful voter registration drives in the country for a while was done by Republicans going to gas stations to register voters because they were pissed off about gas prices.
Well,
To my understanding, that is how they actually wound up getting more registered Republicans in Florida than Democrats, which is something that had never happened in the state's history, which is why it's pretty solidly red at this point. Yeah. So I think one of the ones that will be that I would advise. Well, I think one of the things I would advise the Trump campaign on, and it's something that would be completely ignored with the incorporation of Vivek. If he does wind up being the VP or is continuing to audition as the VP pick, it seems like he's the sort where you have him say some of the more bombastic
hmm
statements that Trump wants to rile up his base and keep them on point, while Trump speaks more as a unity and reconciliation side of things. I think that could win over some independents. A more relaxed Trump, if such a thing exists.
yeah, he with his speech tonight, he was definitely not that one compared, at least compared to Iowa.
No, uh, although I think that he was genuinely expecting Haley to drop out
hmm
because of like it seemed like she came out and gave her speech early to avoid giving it before the real scale of her loss became visible.
hmm
And yeah, at this point, it seems like, you know, I would have expected her to drop out. Like that seems like the smart move. But that didn't happen. And instead, she came out and she's talking like she's got a chance in South Carolina, which I'm not sure. I think that Trump's response there was sort of tactical because at this point, if she really continues, she's by and large going to be considered poison to the majority of Republicans in the country, effectively ending her political ambitions
Yeah, it's.
for
I mean,
anything in
she's
the
pretty much
future.
already there. She already
Uh,
has the reputation of being, for lack of a better word, bought and paid for, and allied with the military industrial complex. Like,
yeah. I mean, I don't want to shit too much on the military industrial complex. It's a wonderful industry. It makes a lot of money, or we sell a ton of weapons, and I don't fault anybody for making themselves money. I happen to like money. I assume you like money too, Colton.
yeah.
Don't give me that crap. You love money. Everybody loves money. But anyway, yeah, like that's not a slide at them, but they are one of those industries that by and large is their sales are entirely dependent upon the current politics.
Okay. Well, can you think of anything else going on yesterday or today?
Sorry, Colton. I was just thinking for a second. The I think the thing that's happened over the last few days that sort of ties all this together is that we over the past week, let's say, you've seen a lot of general election polls come out, and the overwhelming majority of these have Trump in the lead with the popular vote. And while a Republican is, just because of all the small states that they carry, is distinctly positioned to win the electoral college and lose the popular vote, it would be almost impossible for a Democrat to win the electoral college if they lose the popular vote. And while, we've sort of had trouble coming up with, you know, things that a Biden campaign could do or what a Trump campaign could do, clearly what Trump's doing right now is working. Whether he's just along for the ride and the way that Biden is handling the situation is causing him to falter. I don't have a good answer for that. But whatever Trump is doing now seems to be working in the eyes of the American public because you know, just as an example, over the past week there have been, I think, 9, just looking at a glance, polls for a general election between Biden and Trump, and Trump won every single one of them. And as a Republican, if you're winning the popular vote, you've got the election in a bag. So whatever Biden is going to do, he absolutely has to make some kind of case why he is more likable than Trump. Excuse me, there was one where Biden won. It was one where Biden won. And these aren't margin of errors. A lot of these are, 11 plus 11 plus 8. These are the kinds of numbers that you have to work on. And I just don't know. I wish I had an answer. I have a lot more money than I do.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what 10 months of inflammatory ads can can accomplish.
Yep. Uh, well, I believe at this point we've talked just about enough.
Yeah,
So, all you poor bastards out there who have managed to listen to us so far, thank you for doing so. Please like, subscribe, comment, what have you. And we look forward to entertaining you next week. Everybody take care.
have a good one, folks.